Adolf Hitler. By April 30th, 1945, the walls were literally closing in on Adolf Hitler. He was hunkered down in a concrete bunker deep beneath the streets of Berlin, while the city above him was being torn apart by artillery. The 1,000-year Reich he had envisioned was barely 12 years old, and Soviet troops were now just a few blocks away. The day began with a surreal attempt at normalcy. In a cramped room underground, Hitler married his longtime companion, Eva Braun. There was a small, somber celebration, but the atmosphere was heavy with the realization that this was the end. By the afternoon, the pleasantries were over. Hitler and Eva retreated into his private study and shut the door for the last time. A single gunshot echoed through the bunker walls. When his staff finally rushed in, they found them. Hitler was slumped on the sofa, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his temple. Eva lay beside him. She hadn't used a weapon, opting instead for a cyanide capsule. She was only 33. Hitler was 56. Following his strict final orders, their bodies were carried up into the scorched garden of the Reich Chancellery. There, they were doused in gasoline and set on fire. When Soviet soldiers eventually reached the site 2 days later, they found nothing but charred remains. The man who had orchestrated a global catastrophe and the deaths of millions spent his final moments hiding in the dark, ending his life in a small, silent room beneath the ruins of his own empire. Joseph Stalin. It's the night of February 28, 1953, and Joseph Stalin is hosting a dinner at his private dacha just outside Moscow. His inner circle is all there, the most powerful men in the Soviet Union. They're eating, drinking, and watching movies late into the night. Stalin is in a rare good mood, laughing with the men who live in constant fear of him. Around 4 a.m., the guests finally leave. Stalin retires to his room and the dacha goes quiet. The next morning, the sun comes up, but Stalin's door remains closed. No orders come out. No phone calls are made. There isn't even the sound of footsteps. His guards and staff stand in the hallway, paralyzed. They are so terrified of the man inside that they refuse to knock. In Stalin's Russia, disturbing the boss without an invitation could be a death sentence. The entire day passes in total silence. It isn't until 10 p.m. that a light finally flickers on inside his room. That small glow gives the guards just enough courage to open the door. They find Joseph Stalin lying on the floor in his pajamas. He's soaked in his own urine, conscious but unable to speak. He had suffered a massive stroke hours ago and had been lying there, helpless on the rug. But even now, the nightmare isn't over. The inner circle is called. They arrive and see their leader dying on the floor, but they are too afraid to act. They call for doctors, but even the physicians are trembling. They know that if they make a mistake, or if Stalin somehow recovers and doesn't like their treatment, they will be executed. For 4 days, the most powerful man in the world lingers in a state of agony. On March 5th, 1953, Joseph Stalin finally dies. Kim Jong-il. It's December 17th, 2011, and Kim Jong-il is boarding his armored private train as it prepares to move across North Korea. He is 69 years old. For 17 years, he has ruled the country through famine, isolation, and absolute terror. He is a man obsessed with control, yet he is haunted by a single paralyzing fear: flying. Because of it, he lives his life on the rails, turning a luxury train into his mobile capital. But somewhere along the tracks, his heart gives out. A massive heart attack strikes while the train is in motion. Between stations, isolated in his private compartment, the dear leader dies. The regime says nothing. For 2 straight days, the world has no idea he's gone. When state television finally breaks the silence, the famous anchor, Ri Chun-hee, appears on screen, dressed in funeral black. Her voice cracks. Tears stream down her face as she delivers the news. Muammar Gaddafi. It's October 20th, 2011, and 69-year-old Muammar Gaddafi is crouching inside a cold, concrete drainage pipe. He isn't in a palace. He isn't in a bunker. He's on the outskirts of Sirte, the last city still loyal to him, covered in dust and clutching a golden pistol. As the men who found him close in, the man who once called himself the King of Kings is begging them not to shoot. He had ruled Libya with an iron fist for 42 years. That morning, his luck finally ran out. A convoy of vehicles had tried to make a break for it as rebel forces moved in, but NATO aircraft spotted the movement from above. A massive airstrike scattered the convoy, leaving Gaddafi and a few loyalists to flee on foot. They crawled into the pipes to hide, hoping the chaos would pass them by. A rebel fighter found him within the hour. The world didn't learn about his end from a press release. They saw it on shaky mobile phone footage. The video shows Gaddafi being dragged from the pipe, disoriented, bleeding from his head, and surrounded by a mob of angry angry fighters. The scene is loud, chaotic, and violent. He is shoved and beaten as the crowd drags him toward a truck. In the middle of the shouting, he is heard asking a single question: "What did I do to you?" The official report would later claim he was caught in the crossfire between rebels and his own loyalists. The footage tells a much darker, messier story. Benito Mussolini. It's April 28, 1945, and the body of Benito Mussolini is hanging upside down from the roof of a petrol station in Milan. He is 61 years old. Just 2 days earlier, he was still convinced he could escape. As his regime collapsed and Allied forces moved in, Mussolini made a desperate run for the Swiss border. He wasn't traveling as a dictator. He was disguised as a common German soldier, huddled in the back of a military truck, heading north along Lake Como. But at a partisan checkpoint, the disguise failed. A fighter peering into the convoy recognized the famous face wrapped in a heavy coat, pretending to be asleep. He was arrested on the spot and taken to a small house in the village of Giulino di Mezzegra. There would be no long trial and no chance for a final speech. The following morning, orders arrived from the partisan command. The Duce was to be executed immediately. Mussolini was walked outside to a low stone wall. In his final moments, he reportedly pulled open his jacket and told the firing squad to aim for his chest. They shot him twice. His body, along with that of his mistress, Clara Petacci, who had refused to leave his side and was killed with him, was dumped into the back of a van and driven to Milan. They were taken to the Piazzale Loreto, the very same square where Mussolini had once displayed the bodies of executed partisans to terrify the public. This time, the roles were reversed. A mob of thousands descended on the bodies. They hung Mussolini upside down from a metal beam above a petrol station, his face battered beyond recognition. The man who had promised to restore the glory of the Roman Empire was now a spectacle for a city in ruins. Italians stood in line for hours just for the chance to spit on him. Saddam Hussein. It's December 30th, 2006, and at 6 a.m., Saddam Hussein is being walked toward a wooden gallows in a small nondescript room in Baghdad. He is 69 years old. Outside, the city is still. The path to this room began 3 years earlier in a cramped spider hole near his hometown of Tikrit. When American forces finally pulled him out, the man who had ruled Iraq with absolute terror for 24 years was disheveled, disoriented, and hiding like a fugitive. His trial lasted a year. The verdict was never in doubt. On the morning of his execution, witnesses are struck by how calm he seems. He refuses the black hood. He clutches a Quran. But as the noose is placed around his neck, the formality of the room shatters. Guards and officials begin taunting him. They scream the name of his Shia rival, Muqtada al-Sadr, right into his face. It is chaotic, loud, and entirely unofficial. Saddam doesn't flinch. He looks at the men shouting at him and asks a single, cold question: "Is this your manhood?" The Iraqi government wanted this to be a controlled, formal execution, but someone in the room is holding a mobile phone. The grainy footage leaks within hours, spreading across the globe in raw, unfiltered detail. The world doesn't see a dignified state ceremony. They see a messy, bitter end in a room filled with shadows.